Hello, and welcome to the Alicia Branham podcast. I am Alicia Branham, author, coach, speaker, and founder of Brand Marketing, and I'm so glad that you're here today. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the hidden cost of hard conversations. And it's something that most leaders don't want to admit, right? The conversations you're avoiding right now, they're already costing you. They're costing you time. They're costing you trust. They're costing you momentum in your business. And in some cases, they're quietly damaging your team. Not because the problem is that big, but because nobody wants to say the uncomfortable thing out loud. It's the truth. So today we're talking about the hidden cost of having hard conversations and why leaders avoid them. What happens to teams when those conversations never happen, and how avoiding one uncomfortable conversation can create 10 bigger problems. Because leadership is not about avoiding tension. Leadership is about having the courage to deal with it. And if you run a business, manage people, or lead a team, this topic is more important than you think. So let's start with the obvious question. Why do so many leaders avoid hard conversations? It's not because they don't see the problems. Honestly, most of the time, they see it very clearly. They see that employee who's underperforming. They do. They see that team member with the negative attitude. They see the salesperson who has stopped producing. They see the partner who isn't pulling their weight anymore. Leaders see it. They see that. But they avoid the conversation. Why? Usually, it really comes down to four things. Honestly, four things. The first one, honestly, is conflict avoidance. A lot of leaders don't like conflict, me included in that, right? We're relationship builders. We like encouraging people. We like motivating people. We like keeping things positive. Hey, but leadership is not just about encouragement, man. Leadership also requires correction. And some leaders are so uncomfortable with conflict, they tolerate dysfunction instead. The reason leaders avoid hard conversations is they don't want to hurt someone else's feelings. This is especially common in smaller companies. You know your employees, you know their families, you know what they're going through in life, and the last thing you want to do is make someone feel bad, right? But the truth is, avoiding the conversation does not protect them. No, it just actually makes the situation worse, because instead of addressing the problem early, the issue grows, and by the time it finally gets addressed, it's bigger than it ever needed to be. The third reason leaders avoid hard conversations is they hope the problem fixes itself. They think maybe the person will improve. Maybe their attitude will change. Maybe the situation will just work itself out. But most problems don't improve with silence, friends. They grow in the dark. Does anything grow in the dark? Nothing good. A fourth big reason leaders avoid these conversations is they simply don't feel prepared. They don't know how to say it. They don't know how the other person's going to react. They don't know if emotions are going to get involved. And instead of stepping inside of that discomfort, they just delay it. Me included. Days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, and before you know it, the problem has become so much bigger than it ever was meant to be, right? So let's talk about the real cost of avoiding these difficult conversations. Because avoiding hard conversations feels easier in the moment, it does, but inside organizations, it creates serious damage. The first thing it damages is trust. Your employees are not blind. They see what's happening. They know the slacker on your team. Trust me, they do. They know who the troublemaker is, who's creating problems. And when leadership refuses to address it, the message becomes very clear for them. Well, standards don't matter around here, right? That's the message people hear. It is. And that destroys trust faster than almost anything else. Because if leadership allows certain behaviors to continue, people start wondering what the real expectations are around here, right? And that confusion spreads through the entire team. No one wants confusion. Another hidden cost, honestly, is that it punishes your best employees. Your best employees suffer. Your top performers notice something's not right. They see someone else is coasting. They see when someone is bringing negativity into the team. They see when someone is underperforming and nothing happens. And eventually, your best employees start asking themselves a question: Why am I working so hard at this level if this level of performance is acceptable here, right? That's when frustration begins. That's when their engagement drops. And in some cases, that's when your best employees decide to leave, not because of the work, but because of what leadership tolerates. Another thing that happens when hard conversations are avoided is resentment builds inside the team. It does. Unspoken issues don't disappear. Do they disappear at your home? They just simmer, right? People start talking privately, frustration grows inside your team, conversations start happening behind the scenes, and slowly, the culture of your organization begins to change. Not because of one big moment, but because leadership refused to address small problems early. And when that happens, the team starts losing respect for leadership. Not because leaders don't care, but because they did not act. Another major cost of avoiding hard conversations is poor communication across the organization. When leaders don't communicate honestly, teams start guessing. Employees fill in the blanks themselves, and guess what? They rarely assume the best, do they? Instead, they create their own story. They start saying things like, hey, leadership, they just don't care. They're afraid to deal with these issues, man. Leadership is playing favorites. And none of those things might be true. But silence creates space for those narratives to grow. And once that happens, your culture, it starts drifting. Instead of clarity, you get confusion. Instead of alignment, you get frustration. Instead of accountability, you get avoidance, right? And the entire organization begins to mirror the leadership's behavior. If leaders avoid difficult conversations, everyone else will too. Now, let's talk about something leaders understand very well, the business consequences. Avoiding hard conversations isn't just a culture issue. It's a performance issue. When underperformance goes unaddressed, productivity drops, deadlines slip, standards fail, and clients, they start to feel the difference, right? And in my world, working with manufacturers, rep firms, and businesses across North America, I see this happen more often than people realize. There are sales teams who refuse to adapt to modern marketing, people who won't engage on LinkedIn, people who resist digital communication, people who simply refuse to evolve with the business. And leadership, they see that. But the conversation, it never happens. And eventually, the business is the one that pays the price because leadership avoidance creates operational problems. Operational problems create financial problems. And financial problems eventually threaten the stability of the business, all because someone avoided a difficult conversation. So what do strong leaders do differently? Strong leaders understand why it's important. Hard conversations are not an act of aggression. They're acts of leadership. And when done correctly, they create clarity. They create accountability. And they strengthen teams because people know where they stand. Strong leaders address problems early, not 6 months later, not after resentment has built up, early. They say things like, hey, I need to talk to you about something that I'm seeing. This behavior isn't aligning with our standards. I want you to succeed here, but something needs to change. That's leadership. Clear, direct, respectful, but honest. Honest conversation. And here's something most leaders discover when they start doing this. Hard conversations are rarely as bad as we imagine. Most employees actually appreciate that clarity. They want to know where they stand. They want the opportunity to improve. And when leaders communicate clearly, the team becomes stronger, not weaker. At the end of the day, leadership requires courage. Not the kind of courage that shows up in some big public moment, but quiet courage to sit down with someone and say, we need to talk. Because avoiding the conversation may feel easier today, but it almost always creates a bigger problem for you tomorrow. Strong leaders, they understand this. They don't run from discomfort. They manage it, they face it, and they lead through it. Because the health of their team and the future of their business, it depends on it. So let me leave you with one question today. Is there a conversation you've been avoiding? Something you know needs to be addressed, but you've been putting it off? If there is, consider this your reminder. Leadership doesn't happen in the easiest of conversations. It happens in the difficult ones. Because clarity builds strong teams, accountability builds strong businesses, and sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can say is simply this: we need to talk. Thanks for listening to today's episode, and if something in this episode hit close to home, that's not an accident. Follow me and subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss the next episode, and please share it with someone you know needs to hear this. Listen, I'll see you on the next episode of the Alicia Branham Podcast.